Hello, everyone. Today is Thursday, April 1st, 2021. We're here for A Course in Miracles Palm Beach Study Group. We are on page 25 in the text, which is chapter 2, section 5, paragraph 3. We're starting right where we left off last week. I have already said that miracles are expressions of miracle-mindedness, and miracle-mindedness means right-mindedness. The right-minded neither exalt nor depreciate the mind of the miracle worker or the miracle receiver. However, as a correction, the miracle need not await the right-mindedness of the receiver. In fact, its purpose is to restore him to his right mind. It is essential, however, that the miracle worker be in his right mind, however briefly, or he will be unable to reestablish right-mindedness in someone else. So, in order to do miracles of love and forgiveness, they need to be expressions of in our mind, of our mindfulness. The miracle-mindedness means right-mindedness. So right-mindedness means spirit-mindedness as opposed to ego-mindedness. So the right-minded neither exalt nor depreciate the mind of the miracle worker or the miracle receiver. So it's a neutral state. So the miracle worker who's offering the love and forgiveness should not be exalted. If he feels exalted, he's coming from ego. Oh, look at me, I'm so good. I'm going to forgive him. But neither should it depreciate the mind of the miracle receiver. Oh, I'm going to do him a favor. You know, he's the poor man. You know, that's ego thinking too. In miracle-mindedness, from the Spirit's point of view, there is no exaltation or depreciation. It's just that from our spiritual selves, we offer, in a very neutral way, love and forgiveness to the other person. So we don't put those values on it like the ego would. However, as a correction, the miracle need not await the right-mindedness of the receiver. So in other words, whether the receiver understands right-mindedness, spirit-mindedness, or not, is not an issue. The important thing is that the miracle worker understands that. So we can always offer the miracle of love and forgiveness to everyone. And whether they're consciously aware of their own spiritual self or not, it doesn't matter. So, in fact, the purpose is to restore him to his right mind. That's what we're trying to accomplish by seeing everyone as a spiritual being and offering love and forgiveness to them in our mind. Then we're opening the door in their mind for them to be conscious of that. And it's not something that happens immediately, but every time we do it, it helps a little bit more, and it helps a little bit more, it helps a little bit more. It is essential, however, that the miracle worker be in his right mind. Like I just said, if you're trying to do this out of your ego mind, well, that's not going to work. However, briefly. So it's like you don't have to be a master guru where you're totally in your right mind all of the time. However briefly you're in your right mind, you will be able to reestablish right mindedness in someone else, even though you may not see that happening in the ego world. Any questions? Any comments? Yes, Eileen.
Yeah, so this is really hitting close to home for me. So what I want to figure out is two things. One is feeling confident in my ability to discern whether where I'm coming from is ego or right-mindedness in a circumstance, and this is the rest of the question. How does this apply in a dynamic, in a relationship where and is this ego where the behavior that's happening is not okay with you? Or is that ego?
Okay. Let's go back to the beginning of your question. How did you phrase it?
Being able to discern.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not really that hard. Okay. Ego is selfish, hateful, jealous, unkind, wanting. Spirit is loving, forgiving, kind, compassionate, giving. So, it's just, well, where is it coming from? That's all you have to do is ask yourself, where is it coming from? Is this coming from anger or love? Is this coming from jealousy or compassion? Where is this coming from? And you're able to discern. Does that make any sense?
It does, but I'm trying to, but there's it's kind of like an in-between spot, because let's say it's not either anger or love. It's really more about trying to navigate being in a relationship where there's behavior that's simply not okay with you.
So can I address that?
Yeah.
Would that be right, John? Okay. I was just talking to John that I'm doing something with counting the Omer, and one of the things we looked at was this week is all about love, and your heart being open. And each week, that's the name of the week, but then each thing has a secondary thing with it. So if you're talking about the second day was about love with boundaries. So we looked at love with love, like sometimes if you some mothers or some people will, or even victimized women or men will accept anything because they want to be, they're in such an overwhelming place of open-heartedness and love, they don't have any restrictions. So they will do everything and they'll be so completely open. But sometimes we're looking at how, when you introduce different factions in with love. So the second day was about love with boundaries. And I think that that's what you're talking about, that sometimes in order to love yourself, there needs to be some boundaries of being able to say, no, this doesn't feel comfortable or right for me. And then the third day was about love with balance. So where is the balance between open-heartedness, gushing love, and boundaries to your heart? and there's a balance of that. So, and it's all out of love, but it's just what, you know, and it's still being true, I think, to the spirit, you know, versus the ego. But I think those are all important components of love.
Thank you, Diane. Eileen, how does that set with you?
It fits. It fits. I think that, you know, when you, I think the key balance, you know, is where you figure out the appropriate level of self-love within the context of interrelationships. You know, it's tricky. It's tricky. And so, you know, if I'm gonna have, I think it's something along the lines of, if I'm gonna have a certain standard that just has to do with what's okay with me and how I'm treated, just from a place of self-love, just okay, not about judging anybody else or what they do, but just in terms of what's going to be okay with me and how I'm treated, in terms of how I take care of myself or how I treat myself lovingly, and how that's going to, you know, what I'm going to do about that in a relationship where the behavior is not okay with me. And I guess, was, you know, in the context of Course in Miracles, wanted to double check, is that an ego-based place? Am I supposed to not allow that? Am I supposed to try to, you know, fight that? Or is that a legit place within the context of, you know, ego versus spirit? That's where my question lies. And so I think what Diane said was directly addressing that. And I do think it helps. Thank you.
Good. So I'll expound.
Could I say one more thing? I just want to say that if in your communicating that you shift to an ego place and it's not coming from a place of love, or if you shift to a place of fear or retribution or something like that, then you've gone into the ego. But if you're able to do it in a place of love, communicating it in a loving way, or at least that's your intention, I think then, and if you find yourself going out of that place, catching yourself and bringing yourself more into balance, what would you say, John?
Yes, I agree. So in interpersonal relationships, especially if it's someone, you know, close that you're living with every day, whatever, there's always disagreements and people rubbing each other the wrong way over various issues and what have you. So the important thing is that when you realize you're getting upset, first of all, you are allowed to say no, first of all. And that's not necessarily an ego thing. You are allowed to say no. But you are also allowed to, in your mind, forgive the other person's behavior. And that's really the key, is that in these situations, you may feel abused in some way, and you can say, no, I'm not going to play that game. I'm not going to take on that abuse. I'm not going to let that affect my spiritual self, but I'll refuse to participate. And yet I will forgive the other person. Does that make sense?
It really does. You know, it gets really tricky when it's a relationship that would be excruciating to leave, even if leaving would be best. But I do hear what you're saying.
Well, you don't have to leave permanently if the situation doesn't call for that. I mean, you know, it can be a temporary leaving, a cooling down period, so to speak. If the other person you know, becomes aware of the fact that, I don't know, let me give you an example from my own life. My mother, dear old mommy dearest.
Thank you, John.
My mother. There's like nothing I could do was right, okay? She didn't like us. Every time we got together, and there'd be an argument. And it was like, she always disappointed in me and what I'm making remarks and this and that. And lots of times then it would just end in an argument, and we both be stomping off to our rooms and slamming the doors. But I finally came to a point where I realized that it takes two to tango. If I refuse to argue, there won't be an argument. And so I changed my mind about the whole thing. And so the next time that I was with her and the inevitable argument started up again, I looked at her and I said, "You're right, Ma." And she looked at me. Well, blah, 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 blah. I said, "Yeah, you're right. I just agreed with her. You're right." And in my mind, I'm sending her love and I'm sending her forgiveness. And what could she do? You can't argue with somebody who refuses to argue with you. And I didn't just walk away. I told her, I says, "You're right, and I love you." After a while, we were able to have a fairly decent relationship with each other. She stopped arguing. She stopped criticizing me and what have you. And if she started up again, I'd just say, "You're right. I was a bad boy." Because what does it matter to me? I know who I am. She doesn't think I'm doing the right thing. Does it really matter? Do I have to get upset about it? No. I can just love her anyway. She's my mother. I love her. And I forgive her. And I won't argue with her anymore. Now, you had a second part to your question, though. Is it still relevant?
I think, yeah, no, I think the total was in there.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you, Diane, too, for your input. So now we're on, what is this? Chapter 4. The healer who relies on his own readiness is endangering his understanding. You are perfectly safe as long as you are completely unconcerned about your readiness, but maintain a constant trust in mind or a constant trust in spirit. If your miracle working inclinations are not functioning properly, it is always because fear has intruded on your right-mindedness and has turned it upside down. All forms of not right-mindedness are the result of refusal to accept the atonement for yourself. If you do not accept it, you are in a position to recognize that those who need healing are simply those who have not realized that right-mindedness is healing. So the healer, that's us, the miracle workers, who rely on our own readiness is endangering our understanding. So, in other words, it doesn't matter whether you think you're ready to do a miracle or not, because you're always ready to forgive if you're in the right mind. So that shouldn't be a concern. You don't have to worry about, am I ready or am I worthy, which is usually much more common. Oh, I'm not worthy to be a spiritual being. You were created a spiritual being. There's no worthiness about it. You are whether you think you are or not. So just accept it already. You are perfectly safe as long as you are completely unconcerned about your readiness, but maintaining a constant trust in the Spirit. That's the thing. Trust is a faith. You gotta have faith. All you really need is. So, if your miracle working inclinations are not functioning properly, it is always because fear, ego, has intruded on your right mindedness, on your spirit mindedness, and has turned it upside down. And ego will take every opportunity it can find to turn you upside down. So, the thing about it is, if you don't know the rules of the game, it's very difficult to win. But when you become aware of the rules of the game and you know how the game is played, your chances of success are greatly increased. So knowing that the ego is always there, standing behind your shoulder, ready to turn you upside down in your mind, is half the game. Well, I know ego's going to try, so I'm on the lookout for that, and I'm not going to let that happen, because as soon as I spot it, I'm going to use the decider in my mind to switch from the ego to the spirit mind, like I did with my mother. My ego mind wanted me to argue with her, but once I had made the decision that I was not going to argue with her anymore, then my spirit mind could come into play and offer calm, forgiveness, peace, because I refused to play ego's game anymore in that situation. So, ego will turn it upside down if you can. All forms of not right-mindedness are the result of refusal to accept the atonement for yourself, or to accept the miracle for yourself, to accept the understanding that, yes, you are a spiritual being, perfect and innocent and pure. And, and so if you're not in that state of mind, then of course you're going to be in the ego state of mind. Yes, Diane.
John, I was going to ask you to define atonement one more time.
We're
What?
just use the word forgiveness.
So, the result of refusal to accept self-forgiveness. So, forgiveness for yourself.
Right. So if you do it.
So wait, if we were to just change the words, I'm going to just change it to what I think you're saying. So, all forms of not being able to forgive or be loving are the result of refusal to accept self-forgiveness.
Or forgiveness for yourself. In other words, the Father forgives you. God forgives you. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you're completely innocent. In reality, God never forgives anybody because there's no need for it. from God's point of view, all of his creation is completely innocent. All of the bad things that we think we've done have been done in the ego world, which is an illusion, which is a dream. And God does not see that. Spirit only sees your true self. So the Father is totally forgiving because there's nothing to forgive. And that's the understanding of the atonement, is that we accept the total forgiveness and love of the Father, which happens because he created us pure and innocent and full of love.
John,
Yes.
we had one time when we were meeting in person, we had talked about no, that was good about substituting the word forgiveness. I was going to say that in the Jewish religion, I had heard about also atonement is uh, at one-ment. So you're being at one. So, and I'm guessing that's either at one with your spirit or at one with God or at one with all. I'm not sure what that would mean.
All of the above.
All of the above. Yeah.
That
That was
one meant being one with God, is being one with the Spirit, is being one. What else did you say? Um, yeah, it is being. There's only one of us.
yeah, at one with all. And if
That one
we're
with
at one with
all,
all,
right.
we're at one with ourselves too.
There's only one God. There's only one Creator. There's only one child. That's all of us. Well, the one Son, as the book says. And we're all one. We are one with God and one with one another. That's one of my favorite affirmations. And I say it every morning. We are one with God and one with one another. So that's the at-one-ment. So if you do not accept it, the atonement, you are in a position to recognize that those who need healing are simply those who have not realized that right-mindedness is healing. Then, in other words, the only reason somebody needs healing in the first place is because they don't realize that they are, in fact, spiritual beings and are completely pure and innocent. So that's why they're stuck in the ego world. They have not realized and they have not come to their spiritual selves in their own mind. So those are the people who need the miracle. Now, paragraph 5, the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. If you don't accept this for yourself, nobody else can accept it for you. If you can't accept that you're a pure and innocent, perfect child of God, then nobody else can do that for you. If you can't accept the atonement, the true love and forgiveness for yourself, well, you're stuck in the ego. That's all there is to it. Everybody has to do it for themselves. We can help other people come to that realization, but just like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, this is the same thing. You know, we can teach you, you can study the course, you can do Buddha meditation, you can do Sufi dancing. It doesn't matter how you're doing it, But if you don't accept it for yourself, then you're stuck in the boat without any oars. You're not going anywhere. The sole responsibility and that's our only responsibility, is what it's saying. There's really nothing else to this life. Our sole responsibility is of us, the miracle workers, to accept the atonement for himself, for ourselves. This means you recognize that mind is the only creative level and that its errors are healed by the atonement. Once you accept this, your mind can only heal. By denying your mind any destructive potential and reinstating its purely constructive powers, you place yourself in a position to undo the level of confusion of others. The message you then give to them is the truth that their minds are similarly constructive and their miscreations cannot hurt them. By affirming this, you release the mind from over-evaluating its own learning device and restore the mind to its true position as the learner. So you become the example to others. And through that example, I was an example to my mother of refusing to argue. Eventually, she refused to argue too. She stopped starting the arguments. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question of in the sentence, the concept of denying your mind any destructive potential. Is this a concept of that because ego is illusory, that there really is no destruction that can be done? I'm just trying to understand that phrase.
Well, yes. First of all the destruction that the ego does is an illusion. It's not real. In reality, it does not exist. It's just a dream, first of all. Secondly, by denying your mind any destructive potential, that's the same thing as saying by denying your mind, by denying ego access to your mind, by just denying the ego within yourself, then you're in a position to undo the level of confusion of others. Because then you see others, when you can see yourself as a totally spiritual being, then you see everybody else as a totally spiritual being. So that eliminates the confusion. No matter what he or she is doing, no matter what he or she looks like, no matter, everybody, I'm at one with everybody else. And I know I'm a spiritual being. So that makes everybody else a spiritual being. So if I stop looking at them with ego eyes, I don't see their mistakes. I don't see their faults. I don't see their distinguishing differences. I only see them as being one. I only see them as spirit. And when I can look at everybody else as spiritual being, as I look upon myself that way, then you're undoing the confusion.
John?
Yes.
Comes to mind love and acceptance. If I love and accept somebody, that is where the conversion happens, the change in the other person, maybe. I've seen people change because I've changed who I am and how I love and accept them. and how I look at their, quote unquote faults. I actually tried this with my daughter and it worked. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be accepted for who they really are. People want you to see that their true self, and you can't do that until you can see who your true self is.
Right. Thank you. Very good. Anyone else?
John?
Yes, Diane.
Okay, I want to go back to that sentence because it's confusing for me. So once you accept this, your mind can only heal by denying your mind any destructive potential. So does that mean by not allowing yourself to be an unloving or unforgiving person? Is that what that's saying? By denying your mind any destructive potential? Is that by saying I'm
Yes.
only going to be loving and forgiving, and I'm going to work hard not to be negative and destructive, but I don't mean destructive, like, holding grudges and being unloving in my actions? Is that what that
Let's
means?
just restate it. By denying your mind any ego thoughts.
Oh, ego thoughts. Okay.
By denying your mind any ego thoughts and reinstating its spirit thoughts, you place yourself in a position to undo the level confusion of others.
That's because you're an example. They can see how you change.
And because you're seeing them differently, you're seeing them from a spirit's point of view instead of from an ego's point of view.
Right.
So you're no longer looking at their faults and their missteps and so you're no longer being critical of them, being judgmental of them.
Huh.
You're no longer looking down at them, So that's by denying ego thoughts, you place yourself in the position. By denying your mind any ego thoughts and reinstating spiritual thoughts, you place yourself in a position to undo level confusion of others. Now, why does it say reinstate the purely constructive powers, to reinstate the spiritual power, the thoughts? That's because that's how you were created in the first place. You're reinstating it. It's not something new. It's something you've always had, right from the get-go. God created all of us absolutely perfect and pure and innocent. That's how we were created. We've got to remember that. We've got to reinstate that in our minds. Yes, Eileen.
Stupid question. Why did we ever leave and become this dualistic and get into this fight to find our way back?
Well, the Course explains that we had a mad thought. The mad thought that we had was that we could be separate or separate ourselves from our Father. And that at the moment that we had that mad thought, we fell asleep. That just knocked us out. We had this thought, oh, I can be independent of my Father. I can be separate from him. I can go off on my own. I can go create my own world. And we went unconscious. We fell asleep. And we did go on to create our own world, the ego world that we created. And we're still sleeping. If we weren't still sleeping, we wouldn't be here on planet Earth right now. As a matter of fact, there would be no planet Earth. So that's how it happened.
Okay.
That's why we have to remember who we are. We have to remember that we are not separate from our Father, that we can never be separate from our Father. And so the imagery, the metaphor is that the loving Father is sitting there at the bedside of his little child who's lying there in his bed having a nightmare. But he's not trying to wake him up. He's simply patiently waiting for him to wake up on his own. And when he does, and when we do, the dream will disappear. Just like it happens here in the ego world. You dream at night, you wake up in the morning. I know I had a dream, and I might remember just little blips of what, after a few minutes, it's gone. You know, the dreams disappear. That's how it'll play out eventually. When everyone reaches the state of atonement, the whole dream will disappear and we'll wake up. And that's where the parable of the prodigal son comes in. The parable of the prodigal son that Jesus taught was illustrating this story, that the son said, well, give me my inheritance, I'm going to go off on my own. And the father said, okay, here, take it. And he went off and he did this and he did that and he did it. But eventually he came to realize that, you know what? This isn't working for me. I'm going to go back to my father. And when he did go back to his father, what did the father do? Hooray, my son came back. Let's have a party.
That's beautiful. I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Well, we still have a little bit of time, so let's move on. We're on paragraph 6. It should be emphasized again that the body does not learn any more than it creates.
Wait, John.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just found this so confusing. I'm not good with these words. Okay, so continuing on that last paragraph, number 5, the little number 5. Okay, the message you then gave to them is the truth that their minds are similarly constructive, and that they're
What sentence are you reading?
It's almost towards the end of the paragraph. It
Yeah.
has like a little 5.
Okay, the message you then give to them. Go ahead.
That's not the part that's confusing to me. The message you then give to them is the truth that their minds are similarly constructive and their miscreations cannot hurt them. What does that mean? Miscreations cannot hurt them.
Well, that's what I just finished saying, that the ego can't really hurt you.
Oh, okay. That's what I didn't realize that had to do with that word. Okay. What does miscreations mean in general?
The ego is the miscreation.
Okay, but if I was to look it up in my phone, what does miscreations mean? Like to not create or something?
A mistaken I don't know what your phone would say about it, but in terms of the course, what the course means by that is that the ego. So
It cannot freeze them. Okay.
You know, the ego tries to torture us, it tries to hurt us, it makes us fearful and all of that. But no matter what the ego does, the ego makes the body sick and everything else, but no matter what the ego does, it really cannot hurt us because we are spiritual beings. And nothing the ego can do can hurt the spiritual being. It may be able to hurt your body, but your body is part of the ego.
John,
Yes.
I can give you a challenge I had with this. Sometimes my mind makes up a story, and I find out later it's not true. And what I do in the meantime, I try to be conscious and recognize that it's a story I'm making up. And I say, it's only a thought. It doesn't mean anything. It's only a thought. It doesn't mean anything. It's something that's a miscreation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Does it apply in the situation?
Yeah, if it's an ego thought, yes.
Yeah. I'll think that somebody doesn't like me, and then I'll go talk to them, and I can tell that they like me. It's just it's an ego thought.
Right. The ego thought that somebody doesn't like me is an inferiority complex. You know, it's just that's the ego playing games in your mind, making you think that somebody doesn't like you.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. So, again, paragraph 6. It should be emphasized again that the body does not learn any more than it creates. As a learning device, it merely follows the learner. But if it is falsely endowed with self-initiation, it becomes a serious obstruction to the very learning it should facilitate. Only the mind is capable of illumination. Spirit is already illuminated, and the body in itself is too dense. The mind, however, can bring its illumination to the body by recognizing that it is not the learner and is therefore unamiable to learning. The body is, however, easily brought into alignment with a mind that has learned to look beyond it toward the light. Anyone? Shall I go over it again? Well, for our YouTube audience, I'll clarify. They might have a question and I don't even know. The body does not learn any more than it creates. So the body is in the ego, and yes, can the body create something? Yeah, sure. We can write poetry. We can do artwork. We create machines. We do all kinds of creating with the body in the ego world. And it can understand those things. As a learning device, though, it merely follows the learner. So what's in the learner's mind, the body will follow along. But if it is falsely endowed with self-initiative, if we give the body, if we think the body can create something on its own in our mind, then, it becomes a serious obstruction to the very learning it should facilitate. And can the body create things like I just said? Yeah, you know, computers and buildings and trains and planes and all, but not unless the mind gives those instructions to the body. All things start with thoughts. There'd be no computer if people didn't think of it first and then put that thought into action.
John,
Yeah.
um, I think you might have sent this last week or the week before, or so, I think it, but what I think you said was that we forget to acknowledge it wasn't just from our minds, but that God, that we were connected to God, and that's what helped us to come. God gave us the gift to help us to create this. Was it you or
Yeah,
that's,
we can be inspired.
but that we didn't do it by ourselves, that this happened because we are connected to
Well,
God or something. I might not have it exactly right. Or maybe it wasn't you that said this. I don't know.
well, you know, we do originate our own thoughts, but then again, a lot of our thoughts are we're receiving them. Our minds are transmitters and receivers, just like a radio station. It emits the radio waves and it sends the song out into the air, but on the other hand, it can receive the messages too through a telephone line or through Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is a better example. Wi-Fi sends and receives the messages, you know, and so the overmind. That's why, and there have been historical instances, like with the telephone. Who was it? Alexander Graham Bell and somebody else, and they both put in patents for the phone, and then they had to have go take it to court to see who was the original patent holder and all of it. The fact of the matter is that thoughts just come from the overmind about these things and can come into several people's different minds at the same time. And then how they carry through with that, you know, then makes a difference in the ego world. But that's still all part of the ego world. Because the only thought coming from spirit mind really is the atonement, is love and forgiveness.
Oh, so then these thoughts, like if somebody invents something, is this part of his own free will and his intellect that created all of this? Or is this inspired unconsciously by a higher power, giving him the ability to create this?
Yes and no. It's both. So Einstein had this thought, this inspiration of relativity, but he worked on all of the mathematics to try to prove it and came up with E equals mc squared. So it's both. You might be inspired, you probably have been inspired to do many things in your life that you did not follow up on. And other people had those same inspirations and did follow up on it. And vice versa. There's many things that you've been inspired that you did follow up on, and other people were inspired with the same thoughts but did not follow up on. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. But we're getting off on a tangent here because we're talking about things happening in the ego world. And we got to get back to what the substance of this paragraph is. The body does not learn any more than it creates. As a learning device, it merely follows the learner. that's us, if falsely endowed with self-initiation, it becomes a serious obstruction to the very learning it should facilitate. If we give the body, if we think the body has that much power, if we think the ego has that much power, the ego itself cannot create. The body, the ego cannot create. So we should not give it that power. So otherwise it becomes a serious obstruction to the learning that we're trying to facilitate. Only the mind is capable of illumination. And spirit is already illuminated. And the body itself is too dense. The body itself is too dense for illumination. It's the mind where inspiration comes from. And the spirit is already illuminated from the get-go. It doesn't have to become illuminated. It is illumination. The mind, however, can bring its illumination to the body by recognizing that it is not the learner and is therefore unamiable to learning. The body's not the learner. The mind is we have to learn within ourselves. The body is, however, easily brought into alignment with the mind that has learned to look beyond it toward the light. And that's what we're trying to learn here in the Course of Miracles, how to look beyond the body into the light, how to use our mind to illuminate, to give us the light from that spirit is freely providing to us at all times. Yes, David.
As you were speaking, I was thinking that my heart comes into an alignment with my mind, and that's where the light is, or one energizes the other. I feel like there's a connection.
Yes, and from the physical point of view, the I don't recall the course talking about the heart, although it may. I don't want to say that's an absolute, but it's mostly talking about the mind. But in on the physical side, in spirituality and all, there's the chakras and all, and the heart is very central to a lot of the spiritual teachings. But the heart is a metaphor for love. So, from that point of view, the love and forgiveness is part of the spirit mind, but it outpictures in the heart chakra, and we use the heart as a metaphor for love. So, you just have to try to be as clear as you can be within your own mind as to how this is working for you.
Well, as you say, it's all one. It's all connected. The heart, the mind, the spirit. That's the ACIM, Holy Trinity, forgiveness.
Right. Yes. Well, dear friends, last call, as my clock says, 8:01. So we have reached the end of our hour for today. Next week, we will pick up with paragraph 7. We'll start off right where we left off. So are there any last minute questions or comments, or anybody, anything?
Thank you, John. It was very enjoyable.
Oh, you're welcome, Diane. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome, Lauren. Thank you. Well, all righty then. Let's end with a moment of silence, shall we?